Hello, my name is Lorna. Thanks so much for joining us for this short recap on clearing resources. So today we're going to run through a few things. So firstly, we're going to look back at last year and what happened with clearing in numbers, how many people went through clearing and what the changes there are. We're also going to have a look at what happened on the student room and kind of key search terms that will help guide you through thinking about this year and help planning there. We're also going to have a look at the clearing decision-making journey. We've actually done our own piece of research through TSR Insight, surveying some students that have enrolled just last autumn in October, and then finally some creative findings. We'll recap at the end for some kind of key actions, just so that you have exactly what you need to move forwards. Last year, 73,320 people went through clearing. That is an increase of almost 10% versus the year before, which is a huge growth. And more than 19,000 applied directly through clearing. This is a real step change to previous years, and I think this is where we need to start thinking about clearing much, much earlier. If we go back to 2015 or 2016, really a clearing campaign might start in July. Clearing campaigns kind of need to start as early as possible, and it needs to be tied into an always-on approach. You need to be telling your students at all times why they'll benefit from studying with you. Thinking about that data then, ultimately you need to do some data deep diving on your own figures. So whilst the national numbers are large and there's a growth of almost 10% going through clearing, what does that look like for you, and where are the students coming from that are choosing you through clearing? Additionally, retention matters more than ever. So students obviously have self-release for the first time. The power is in their hands to take themselves away from you. You need to convince them at all times that you are the right choice for them. So what happened last year? A Level results day in the student room is one of the biggest days of the year for us. Last year we had more than 1.5 million page views on results day alone. In fact, more than 32,000 hours were spent on the student room on results day. It's huge. Now the reason students choose the student room is because we're there for them. We have a whole range of volunteers and of course you guys, all of your official reps talking to students and reassuring them about their results and their future. So both students, parents and teachers come to the student room to ask for advice. On results day we had more than 500,000 unique users on the site. And also just to recap then on the fantastic official reps for you guys, posting last year was up 37.5%, which was fantastic. So great that you're supporting students exactly where they are on the student room. We also saw some really interesting growth in some subject areas for engagement for students. Veterinary medicine has never really been a course in clearing, but of course we're seeing that change recently. There's a new veterinary school that opened at Surrey a few years ago, and so last year we actually saw page views grow by 77% year on year. Huge growth. Of course, I think the rest of the growth is coming from subjects you might expect. So law is always really popular and that continues to grow year on year, so that actually grew 62%. Social work was up 39%. Physiotherapy, interestingly, 35%. There's clearly a real interest in subjects allied to medicine there. And then geography, computer science and economics and PPE also saw some significant growth. There was growth elsewhere, but these are the subjects that we've seen the most growth and interest in on results day alone. In terms of Google Trends, now I know that search is such an integral part of results day and clearing for most universities, and as it should be. Ultimately, you will do a big awareness campaign in the lead up to results day, and you want to capitalise on that through Google and just make sure that if they're searching for anything to do with you, you're the top search term. Absolutely. But I think sometimes there's a reticence to think outside of clearing itself and recognise that ultimately results day is results. It isn't about clearing for the majority. So think about that as well. So in 2019, the search terms that were most prevalent were all about grade boundaries and the exams themselves. So I'm just going to read some top topics. So AQA, one of the exam boards, Oxford, Cambridge and RSA examinations, interestingly, Edexcel, another exam board, Hotline, so unsurprising there, and actually Aston University was one of the top universities, which is super interesting. Then top related search queries were specifically AQA grade boundaries, Edexcel grade boundaries, and A Level grade boundaries 2019. So you can see there that students are really concerned with their results, even if they've got in or even if they've got to your university. They are so keen to make sure they've done the best job themselves. exams is really stressful. This is something that they know they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives. So even if they get into your fantastic university, they have a real concern that if their grades aren't what they wanted or up to scratch, that it's going to haunt them for the rest of their lives. And that's why it's so important for them. So have a think about that when it comes to your PPC strategy. Certainly some of these terms may be a lot cheaper to bid on, and you might get some really good exposure. So how are students feeling about results day? It's really important to us to acknowledge and address students' feelings. We pride ourselves on flying the flag for students and everything that concerns them. So every year we ask them how they're feeling about their results and the lead up to that. We're really happy to say that this year, or in 2019, they were feeling a lot better than the previous year. However, there are some areas where students are feeling super negative and really anxious. So London, the Midlands and the Northwest were the areas feeling kind of most negative and most nervous about it. But happily, the Northeast and the Southwest were feeling pretty good, which is fantastic. But I do wonder how much that correlates to students going to university. So we know that students in the Northeast are least likely to go to university for lots of reasons, and students in London are most likely to go to university, and the growth is primarily driven by students in London going to university. So it seems like despite students wanting to go to university and wanting to do the best in their exams, ultimately it's about whether or not they're going to university that's driving that anxiety. So just a few key takeaways. Just remember that results day is just that, it's results day. Clearing is a minority. It's only 17% or just over 17% of students that are going through clearing, and the rest of students are going through the main scheme and getting through directly. So let's make sure we focus on congratulations as well as clearing and make it a really positive experience for everybody. Also, just make sure you are where students are. Most of them are on the student room at some point during the day, so make sure you and your official reps are there to talk to them. But of course they're on social, on Instagram, and certainly Instagram engagement was up last year. Lots of you are doing this already, but do consider providing support, advice and guidance content around managing stress and anxiety. This is a major issue for young people, we all know this, so anything you can do to curb that and make them feel better will be really, really beneficial. Okay, so now I'm going to take you through some of the key findings as part of our TSR Insight survey that we ran last autumn. If you would like to work with TSR Insight, certainly get in touch. They are a full-service market research agency. Just to give you some information about the respondents and the profiles of them. So 14% of respondents had gone through clearing themselves, 17% have received 3 school meals, which is really interesting. That's massively over-indexing on the national average. 46% of respondents said that neither of their parents had gone to university. 68% of respondents were female, which is a really high number, but actually very representative of students enrolling at university. And the vast majority of respondents had studied at A Level, so only 7% had studied a BTEC. Of the respondents that studied A Level, 87% had achieved CCC or above, so students that are very likely to go to university already. So that's a bit about the people that have responded. In terms of the questions we asked them, so one question was, what is the main reason you applied through clearing or adjustment? And 3 in 10 respondents entered clearing because they'd changed their mind either at their course or the university. That's a really big figure. 30% of people applying through clearing because they changed their mind. I think there's lots of things that might be driving that, and certainly A-level reform could be a big driver of that. But the main thing to think about in relation to students changing their minds is that you can influence them. Combination of influencing the students that have chosen you already to make sure that they stay, but also knowing that students that are changing their minds are open to changing and potentially changing to you. So really think about that when you're thinking about your messaging and targeting. In terms of the reasons they were changing their minds, I'm just going to read some verbatim quotes for you here. So one says, I chose something I thought I would enjoy more. So that's about the subject choice. Another person said, I felt like the course I chose would not interest me like the course I'm now studying. And finally, initially I didn't secure an offer to my first choice, so I reevaluated my position and changed course, which has turned out really well. So changing courses mostly about really choosing something they enjoy more, and this is where I think A-level reform comes in. So previously, in old A-levels, students would do their exams in AS and have a really good guide of where they're going to land at the end of A-level. Students really choose subjects on what they're good at and what they enjoy, and there's a real correlation between what you're good at and what you enjoy. If it turns out that a course subject area you really enjoyed, you've ended up bombing in, the likelihood is you're going to refocus your attention on what you're doing well in. Students don't really have that anymore. Of course there's mock exams and different assessments, but the lack of coursework and the lack of AS levels means that students just don't really know where they're going to fall, and by the end of the second year their whole position and what they've enjoyed, where they are, might change drastically. And that's probably what's driving this change in course. In terms of their changing the mind of university itself, a lot of this is about location. So I'm just going to read again a couple of verbatim quotes. One person said, "Too far from home, got better grades, went somewhere closer to home and better for me." Easy. And then the other person said, "Didn't want to go to my insurance university, so thought to try and see if I could get a place somewhere closer to home." So this is where the kind of uncertainty falls in. Students, if they're not getting in somewhere they feel familiar and aware of, ultimately they want to feel and find somewhere that's closer and safer. Being closer to home just feels much safer, much more secure, and perhaps students are worried about accommodation and want to make sure they have somewhere to live that's comfortable. So another key question we asked was, before going through clearing or adjustment, which best describes the university you enrolled at? So a third of respondents had either not considered or not heard of the university prior to clearing, which is crazy. I do think, again, this just opens the doors up to the massive influence you can make through a really well integrated, robust campaign. You want to really touch on reach and frequency, finding all the people that are most likely to choose you based on some potentially really good propensity modelling, but also thinking about that key point earlier around being closer to home. Again, having a look at your data to see where students have historically come to you. The vast majority of students in clearing are not travelling 200 miles. They're not going to be travelling 4 hours each way to get to a university. Some will, but it's not the majority. So have a look at that data, see where their home is, and then you can kind of use that as your base. Certainly push it a bit further because every year more and more people are going through clearing, but ultimately you want to focus on a really kind of small area. So we also asked students about their experience of finding a place through clearing and how they found it. I'm going to talk to you about the results there, but also again take you through some verbatim comments because I think this is really useful for you to take away. So firstly, for 2/3 of those that went through clearing, the experience was really easy, but the rest found it quite difficult. And interestingly here, the experience was way worse for male respondents. Now, in terms of the reasons for that, again, I'm just going to read you some verbatim comments. So, very negative. "I spent a week on the phone to be turned away by 15 different universities on their clearing hotlines. I eventually got into this uni and 2 others." One other person said, "It was all new to me, so quite daunting and somewhat scary." One person said, "Some universities were welcoming, others looked down on me." And another person said, "When calling University X and University Y, their helpline was quite rude. However, all other universities were fine." I think this is a really interesting and pertinent point. Clearing, I remember the war rooms for clearing when I worked at university, and the rooms full of student ambassadors and staff and everyone mucking in to get on their phones to students, and it can feel really high stress. Now, the stress on the students is much, much higher. Students phoning in maybe aren't communicating necessarily in the best way, and I do wonder whether male respondents are feeling that very keenly themselves. So maybe they're phoning and maybe the interaction isn't quite as positive as they'd like it to be, and ultimately, unfortunately, then the person on the other end of the line is perceived to be more rude than they really are. But just bear this in mind, it's really important to be as positive, as supportive, as polite as possible. You're going to have to reject a lot of people. Make sure that rejection is really kind. So just to recap then on the clearing insights from our fantastic survey done by TSR Insight. So 3 out of 10 respondents who applied through clearing or adjustment did so because they changed their mind about the course or the university. That's so key. Make sure that you are giving them the right reason to choose you and also to stay with you. Almost half of respondents, interestingly, that had gone through clearing with us told us that they'd use a self-release button. This is very different to the overall figure, so I'm not quite sure what's skewing that. It's really interesting, but clearly self-release is really powerful and important for these students. Around a third of students had either not considered or not even heard of the university before they enrolled there. There is so much opportunity to influence these students in the lead up to results day. And finally, while most students did find it an easy process, the students that found it most difficult were male respondents and male students. So just make sure that you're considering that and being as kind as possible to students on the phones. So let's talk about some creative trends. At the Student Room, we're really lucky to work with most universities in the UK, and all of those that go through clearing tend to use us in some form or other. Because of that, it means we can see some really interesting trends across the year, and particularly around clearing. So in 2019, red was the key colour, all about action, kind of aggressive and urgent. This year that was softened very slightly to more of a neon pink or a hot pink. Of course it has that vibrancy, it has an urgency. You know, I always think of navy as the colour of higher education. Think about, yeah, basically all education sites, it's blue. So having something that contrasts is really, really effective. In terms of the messaging and calls to action, so in the lead up to August, what you want is something that's more emotive and gives students a reason to think about you and reason to choose you and expresses your values and what you have to offer. But in results week and results day, certainly those really strong calls to action, do this now, apply now, call us now, that was really effective. Thinking about those calls to action then, it's really important that as you're planning you have kind of time frames for the different types of messaging. Of course you have hopefully a really strong brand that you're behind and feel proud of, and you want to flex that in different ways at different points of the year. So certainly during clearing you want to think about almost kind of 2 or 3 waves of your clearing campaign. Pre-clearing campaign that's all about emotive engagement, a results week campaign that's about action, 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 and a post-clearing campaign that reminds students that you're still open and still taking applications if that is the case. Okay, so let's just recap on all the key takeaways. I've summarised them into 6 things. So firstly, do a data deep dive. This is always my first recommendation. You need to understand what's going on for you. Every university is different. Have a look back at historic trends for you through clearing, who released from you last year, who chose you last year, and from that data make some informed choices about targeting. Secondly, the work starts now. Students are already thinking about clearing. So on the student room, conversations started in January about clearing this year, which is crazy. The work really does start now and you need to have an always-on approach. Thirdly, have a real focus on retention and create senses of FOMO. So this can be as part of your applicant days or offer holder days. But again, while students are self-releasing because they're changing their minds, you want to make sure that those that are firming and ensuring you still think of you as their best choice. You don't want students to be self-releasing from you just because they want to move closer to home. You should be their best choice. On a 4th point, just remember that this is results day. The vast majority of students, for them, are getting the grades they're getting in, they're getting to their university of choice. It's a kind of a small minority really that are going through clearing, and of course it's really important for universities, but let's also focus on the fact that it's results day. Part of that is being really, really congratulatory and celebratory for students that are getting through, but it's also about thinking about your PPC and search strategy, thinking about those wider search terms where you might be able to get a lower cost per click, but also reach an audience that may not have been considering you already. Also, if students are looking at grade boundaries, the likelihood is they may have got into their university, but they may not feel super proud of their results, and there's certainly an opportunity there to influence them to choose you. Remember, always talk to students as well. So students are on the student room, talk to them there. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they are everywhere. They're on WhatsApp if you've got an open API there. Talk to them where they are, spend time talking to them, and you want to create an emotional connection, and this is the place you can do it. Finally, make sure your campaign creative is bold. So we may see some slightly different colours this year, but over the last 2 years there's been a clear focus on reds and pinks. Bright, vibrant and urgent. Also, just make sure you're thinking about your call to action strategy. You can't say book now or apply now when it's 2 months before clearing, but you should be thinking about different kinds of calls to action where they can sign up for a priority list, or perhaps just get some advice and guidance from you. Maybe you'll have a clearing webinar where they can get fantastic advice and guidance in a different way from you. So you want to kind of have a really good early engagement strategy and then move to stronger calls to action when it comes to results week. You have to be smart around this. So finally, how to get involved in the student room. I've talked about talking to students on the student room, so if your university has a university partner pack and an official rep, fantastic. If you don't, then certainly come and talk to myself or one of the team and we can work that out for you. Also take advantage of our really fantastic emails and SMS. We have a bespoke database, so when it kind of starts for revision period, we start asking students whether or not they're interested in clearing, and so students opt in to find out about clearing. This isn't that we're sending out messages just to any random year 13s. These students have chosen to find out more information about clearing, and that's really why engagement is so high. So the average open rate for emails over the clearing database is more than 27%, which is far above the benchmark for the education sector. And the engagement rate is also super high, almost 9% on those engagement rates, which is exactly what you want to see. SMS also, the average click rate was around 10%, so you're looking at a really fantastic return on investment there. And also I take heart that our students are really getting value out of the emails that we're sending them through you, which is great. You can also reach our hyper-engaged audience on the site itself, either through on-site display and retargeting behaviourally, or through programmatic. So you can use our first-party data and find them elsewhere on the site. We have some really good measures and really good ways of knowing that students are interested in clearing. Part of that, of course, is the clearing database, but also we have a really well-loved and high engagement clearing content hub where students are coming actually all year round for really helpful advice and guidance around this. So again, we can retarget those users because we know they're interested and find them out wherever else they are. I think you've actually missed, unfortunately, our February early bird discount, which gave you an extra 10% off, but we can always do a really fantastic bespoke service for you, exactly what you need. So get in touch and we can see how we can help you out. Cool. I really hope this has been useful for you. Clearing every year seems to be getting bigger and bigger, and I think this may be the fiercest year yet. We're looking at the deepest dip of the 18-year-old demographic, and certainly, hopefully after this year, things will get a lot easier, but the market really is fierce. It hopefully shouldn't stay this way. This should be the last year that we'll really feel the pinch. But just make sure you're thinking really strategically, make sure you're connected directly to your audience and talking to them, and make sure that you're using your data. Thank you so much, and see you at the next one.